Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I will share my screen to join me on the right. There we go. You are in the SB 554 implications for dual enrollment session, and it is lovely to have you here, Jenny or Peter.
Hi, welcome everyone. Really glad to be here. My name is Jenny Malika. I'm with High Road Alliance.
And Peter Simon, the other half of High Road Alliance. Just very briefly, I think probably a number of you have been involved with some other webinars we've done via CAPE, but High Road Alliance really focuses on equitable access to career pathways. And we work with a whole number of different entities, adult schools in this context, but also community colleges, workforce boards, labor unions, community groups. Over the last 2 years, we have done a series of briefs, which are based sort of like the brief we're going to present and the information we're going to address today. They're really based in your experience, the practitioners in the field. And our briefs have been to, someone's got some serious background noise, but anyway, we've done briefs on immigrant immigration, transition, integrated education and training, and today we're going to be talking about adult dual enrollment. Next slide.
And I'm Ute Maschke. I'm the manager of adult education in San Diego.
Sorry.
It's quite all right. We have a lot to cover. So, and I would also like to welcome 4 guests we invited to this session. At least 2 of them are already here. So a special quick welcome to Neil Kelly and Karen Zachary from the Department of Education. We are also hoping to welcome a little later Gary Adams and Myra Diaz from the Chancellor's Office for Community Colleges as our special guests to listen in on our conversation, and we'll get to that very soon. What we would like to do with you as our thinking partners is to move the conversation on SB 554 forward. And we want to focus on that forward. We want to share findings. Peter already alluded to them. And some state of things with you. Where are we at in 2022 with adult education dual enrollment and especially SB 554? And then ask you to join us, invite you to join us in a conversation on how we move the conversation and how we move SB 554 and dual enrollment forward together. So why do we even talk about dual enrollment for adult education? Well, we need to. It makes education more equitable. It serves and addresses the needs of adult learners who are often underserved and overlooked. It provides opportunities for those learners to accelerate, to advance, and also explore college opportunities that they might not have even considered. It does so without pressure, or dare I say, use the word punishment. And it allows students, it supports students in planning wisely how education might interact and fit into their lives. It can accelerate pathways to careers, to college and career goals. And it is, of course, part of a larger toolkit for transition strategies that we are not only tasked with under CAPE, but that we also identified as a true measure of our success. If we support our students in transitions to successful, meaningful lives and jobs, we have achieved our objectives. Jen.
Would you like me to do this one, Ute?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Senate Bill 554 was authorized in 2019. And this slide just gives you an overview of what's included there because it's had real consequences and opened up new opportunities that weren't there prior. So the bill authorizes an adult student who is pursuing either high school diploma or high school equivalency certificate in the state to enroll at a community college as a special part-time student. This special designation allows students to access college-bearing courses, which they wouldn't have otherwise, and with no tuition costs. And something especially notable about that is that that financial aid clock, the time limits on their financial aid doesn't begin yet. And so that's some benefits for the student. Clearly, there are also in the bill is an enhanced community college apportionment for special admit students. And that comes through implementation of the student-centered funding formula. So it's described in the bill in relation to that. And there's clear implications here for increased community college enrollment. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah,
That was sort of our
so
overview.
many of you, I'm sure, are very familiar with SB 554 and also with 554 being an expansion really under agreements that already existed, right? The College and Career Access Pathway Program has been in place for quite a while. SB 554 was in a way already an expansion of that initiative to better meet the needs of underserved, historically underserved populations. So it's really adding to 8030 and also now complemented, if you will, by Assembly Bill 102, which is a further expansion of dual enrollment processes that some of us might be familiar with, some of us might be unfamiliar with. So let's take a look first at what has already happened in the state of California, and then dive into some thinking together, some questions we might want to address together about education dual enrollment processes. And yes, discuss that intersection that John already pointed to that is so extremely interesting and exciting. All right, let's move to the next slide, and that's the state of things regarding dual enrollment in the state of California.
Thanks, Uta. So Peter and I wanted to spend just a few minutes at the start of this time we have together today to share with you the brief that we produced earlier this year for CAPE TAP entitled Dual Enrollment in California Adult Education and Community Colleges, Lessons and Opportunities. And really, this is going to be a brief overview because we encourage you to read the brief. It's full of great, oh good. So Peter put the link in the chat. It's right there on the CAPE website. We had the privilege of interviewing in depth 10 programs that are implementing adult dual enrollment. We also held what we call a peer learning circle, where we invited people across the state with varying levels of experience and degrees of involvement in adult dual enrollment to come and share and ask questions and provide resources to each other. We also had advisory sessions with people who've developed deep expertise in this area across the state. And out of this, a real goal of this brief was to identify practitioners' tips and lessons learned, and really to harvest the wisdom from all of you out there who have been working hard to give this a try and implement it. So the brief really summarizes some of those just effective practices and words of wisdom. Through this work and engagement, we also surfaced what could be seen as some recommendations for sort of systems level improvements or policy recommendations or opportunities to provide more guidance or more structure. And so those are also highlighted in the brief. And we encourage you to take a look. So make note of that link.
So again, we're just going to touch upon some of what is, there's far more, there's a lot of detail in the brief and examples from specific sites. But the first area was just in terms of overall sort of themes, was around securing partnership and commitment. And I think, really, maybe it goes without saying, but almost all of these different themes we've worked on, partnership becomes kind of the punchline and the key theme. That what we really found is that the consortia who already have been doing a lot of collaborative work, who've broken down some of those boundaries between community college and adult education, are the ones who've been most successful initially in terms of putting in place adult dual enrollment programs. And obviously you need a partnership where you need active participation of reps from the adult school and the community college. And you really have to, what we've seen is, you really have to work at open communication and buy-in, and really having everyone at all levels understanding how this works. And really having some commonly shared goals and agreed upon policies. And it's not like a one and done, you have to be revisiting these issues. One example where this comes up is in terms of establishing, for example, a data sharing agreement between adult ed and community colleges. Okay, Jenny, would you like to speak about the next one?
Sure. Yeah, we heard a number of themes related to student eligibility and the application process for what was a different student experience in many ways. One thing we heard was significant roles across a number of different functions in the colleges and the adult school. So big roles for admission and records in the colleges, for counselors, as well as for deans, providing some leadership around these processes. There also is quite a lot of exploration of how to define who's eligible within a school, or, and how to document that eligibility to meet the requirements of the legislation. There were also different approaches to assessing readiness for college level courses. There was a lot of work that went into defining application processes to be an adult dual enrollment student. So creating new application forms, creating ways for students to access CCC Apply. There was a lot of interest in how to code appropriately in the MIS. So the coding authorized to enroll in college and adult school becomes a very important code in these programs, and sort of systematizing the use of that code was important. And then finally, really a deep understanding that getting all these systems and processes right is really critical to making sure that these students are avoiding being charged tuition. So getting the systems in place to make sure that that's the case. Peter.
Okay. The third point is marketing and student engagement. And I think one just overall theme with that is it from what we heard from people, just doing a flyer about adult dual enrollment is not going to work. It really is. What works has been people to people, often one-on-one outreach and communication, because it's a new concept for a lot of people. It's a scary concept for a number of adult students. And I'll just say that we were quite humbled by the amount of knowledge that staff at the adult school and the community college need to have to really be able to clearly explain this to people. So there's a lot of great examples in the brief around collaborative marketing, both in terms of the counseling department, information sessions, and I think importantly, having student ambassadors, students who've been through this, who can talk to their experience and communicate with folks coming up in the adult education world about the value of this. And specifically, because it's a very both salient feature of adult dual enrollment, and one that, again, people kind of at first hearing about it often go, really? You can do that? Is reaching out to undocumented adult education students, because this is a great opportunity for them in terms of access to resources at the community college. And oftentimes we found that has been done effectively through the Dreamer or DACA program at the community college. Jenny.
Mhm. Yeah, so we heard a lot of different approaches and even philosophies around which courses adult dual enrollment students would be enrolling in through the college. So some programs are limiting those to sort of a few courses that seem to be most appropriate. Some are coming up with a sort of broader number of recommended courses, and some are really believing that they need to make any course open to their dual enrollment students and really encourage students to explore that on their own. This is reflected also in how the programs are structured. Some are intentionally creating cohorts of dual enrollment students who go through a course or a set of courses together. Some are working with community colleges to reserve seats for adult education students in certain classes. And then some, in that spirit of openness, are really allowing students to have single seats in any class in the college. Some of the focus on specific courses is around guiding students toward courses that could help to meet GE requirements, or that could count toward a high school diploma or high school equivalent, given that that is one of the students' goals who are for students who are eligible for this program. Or some are more employment focused and encouraging students to pursue college courses that lead towards certificates or could prepare them for employment. Peter.
Okay, and then the final area is supporting persistence and completion of college courses. And again, as we've referenced before, the transition in different consortia, they have different titles, but the people doing the transition work, which is often transition specialists or counselors, have a huge role. And we had a chance to interview several of them who work specifically with adult dual enrollment. And again, I think we were quite struck by the amount of knowledge they have to have in terms of breaking this down, and that each student's situation is somewhat different. So it's not like a cookie cutter kind of thing. It's really important from what we learned that the support has to be continuous, both on the adult school, adult education side, and at the college side. So when a student transitions over to going as a dual enrollment student at the college, it's not like the adult school says, goodbye, good luck, let us know how it goes. It's very much an engagement throughout the whole process. And some examples we heard around what's done to really support the persistence and completion are having dual enrollment orientations for students who are engaging in that process, offering college readiness courses, including offering them at the adult school, weekly advising sessions, help with textbook, both access online, but also the cost of textbooks. Some folks have been doing regular text messaging between the transition staff and the adult dual enrollment student. And just making sure that the transitioning students coming to the community college are aware of all the college services, because they probably are not aware of what's really available to them. And overall, just being available to troubleshoot the problems that come up.
Mm-hmm.
Anything you want to add on that, Jenny?
Yeah. I mean, just one more thing before we hand it back to Uta and kind of open up for discussion here. But I think we don't have a bullet for it here, but really one of the overarching themes is Peter and I found, just a lot of interest and enthusiasm about this new opportunity, a lot of curiosity about what the possibilities could be and about how to structure a really strong program. And just so many questions, so much eagerness to connect to others who are doing this work, sort of looking for ways to get support from peers, but also ways to get guidance and instruction or direction from the state level. A lot of openness openness, I think, to kind of hearing how can we do this well, and how can we learn and put together the strongest programs we can to benefit the most students and really make this impactful. I think that's the point we're at right now across the state. And we just heard this kind of enthusiasm and commitment to really doing this right.
Right, and that's why we really welcome the opportunity to have this discussion today specifically. So thank you. Uta, back to you.
So yes, we need to talk. We absolutely need to talk. There's an interesting tension and opportunity. There's eagerness, there's curiosity, there's excitement. And then there's also this moment where we still find ourselves 3 years later, not knowing really how to move forward, many of us, right? So SB 554 came on board fully in 2019. In 2022, many of us are still in these sort of initial stages, excitement, a lot of questions, and not exactly sure what's best, how to work it, and how to move forward, which for my impatient nature is not good. 3 years later, what's not working well, what could be better, where's the opportunity? Those questions also, I think, came to the fore when we met as a community of practice, right, and started to talk about this. How can we move forward from initial planning, initial excitement, into taking SB 554 and other dual enrollment initiatives to the next level? Some of you might have been in another session during the summit where there already was a suggestion what else to do with SB 554. Now we have this interesting expansion of the college and career program pathways already. So we want to dive a little bit into where are we at with SB 554? What can we do in the future? And we wanted to share with you 4 questions, one by one, for us together to explore. Feel free to unmute or add to the chat. The chat has the advantage of us sort of not missing something. And then have our guests listen in, and then we'll come back to our guests after those 4 questions and see what is the takeaway for us all, right? How can we move forward together regardless of where we are at in the process? So I hope that will work for us. The first question we have for all of you, regardless of where you are at in the process, what is an adult education dual enrollment strategy that has worked really well? From where you're sitting, what has worked for you? If you could add a few things to the chat, or feel free to unmute and share, that would be awesome. There's already one comment from John. He had to leave. He mentioned ATB. We can come to. Any thoughts?
Any thoughts? Maybe particularly one where you thought, wow, that worked much better than we thought it would, which we heard from some people.
I'll speak up. I'm Dana Gallery from the West End Corridor Consortium, which is Chaffey College. So as you know, Chaffey College, I think, was in one of the ones that was interviewed in the study, and they were kind of out in the front. But what I notice is that this is a program that you don't just do it. You don't just figure it out. You have to constantly keep evolving and adjusting. And it just seems like the college is always working on the application form, the onboarding process for students, the outreach. We're just constantly, doing what needs to be done. and looking at what works and what doesn't work, and just evolving. It's a program that is just, you know, you have to look at your students. They're maybe not the same from year to year. So, you know, even though Chafee was or is one of the big ones, and we had almost 200 dual enrollment students in the past, I think 21, 22, which is a large number, I think, in the state. We still have to keep working on it constantly.
Yeah, thank you. I think it also deserves extra credit here. I don't think SB 554 would have become reality without Chafee College.
Yeah, I remember those days. It was kind of touch and go, and you know, it was like, let's mobilize the troops, but
Yeah.
you know, we did. So
and I think that's a very valuable strategy to consider it as always a process, right? It's not one and done. Having that open mindset helped us as well here in the East region of San Diego tremendously.
yeah. And then you have things like pandemics, which you just throw everything off and change your kind of whole way of doing things. So now, basically, I think the entire program is an online program now, which we sort of, no surprise, found that worked better for our adult students with all their schedule challenges and that sort of thing. So, you know, you find out things that you didn't realize at first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I would agree. We had the same experience for us. What worked really well was actually when everything was online. It's working now too, but it helped us, I think, matching students with courses they were interested in and that were manageable for them much faster. And online actually benefited many of our students who had transportation issues or work schedules that didn't allow for them to attend certain classes. So in a way, that time worked to our benefit. In the chat, their support services were mentioned twice. In our consortium, and I think that's somewhat similar to Chafee, we actually designated persons who are coordinators or contact persons for our dual enrollment initiatives. It needs and deserves the support almost on a one-on-one basis with students. I would agree.
Mm-hmm.
Any other best practices, positive surprises from anyone else? If
I see
not,
Neil's hand.
oh, Neil.
Yeah, I was looking at the data, and you would think there would be a drop because we have one metric in Launchboard that says co-enrolled in a credit-bearing class. So that would be co-enrolled, meaning in the adult school or maybe non-credit in a credit-bearing class. And all our other data from the last couple of years has dipped, but not in dual enrollment. It's kind of stayed steady. In fact, it's actually increasing a little bit. So that's encouraging to see. Despite the pandemic, we're on the upswing with what they consider co-enrollment. I don't know what that data actually is, but at least it's encouraging to see that. And then I've been doing the transition strand at the summit this week, and I've sat in quite a few different presentations. And like Dana was saying, there's all kinds of things that you have to stay on top of with transitioning students, helping them figure out to use the community college registration system, to getting familiar with the campus. There's so many things that has to go on. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Yes, Dana. Dana points out enrollment in our dual enrollment program actually did increase during the pandemic. I think that's also one of our positive experiences. We actually had a different type of student, a new type of student joining us for these dual enrollment under SB 554. Students who were kind of tired of doing their high school diploma, weren't really motivated, but when dual enrollment came on, they had additional motivation to join our high school diploma, high school equivalency programs, and start college through SB 54. So we are actually also, we are finally able to reach those students, and that increased numbers at the adult school and the colleges. So it has a really positive.
It's really interesting. Yeah.
Let's check out another question. From your perspective, from where you're at in the process, what have you learned about partnering through working on adult education dual enrollment and SB 554? Yeah, we'll come back to the FTE question. From your perspective with art school or college, what did you learn about partnering? Jenny, did it come up in the when you had the interviews with the focus groups? You're on mute.
Peter mentioned a few points. It's definitely a theme we saw that programs that were able to describe some existing strength in their adult education consortium were leveraging that, because they had over the years that the consortium had been established, they'd been working across their adult ed community college boundaries in a variety of different ways around transition services or other programs. And so they described that being an asset in exploring adult dual enrollment together. I think something else that we noted is not only partnerships across the adult ed and community college space, but really a need for partnerships within institutions to sort of pull this off because of the sort of complexity of different processes that had to come together and the different individual roles that had to support programs. But I'm curious if others in our session today have experiences related to this. I see Kim saying differing processes can make joint programs difficult when partnering. Do you want to say more about that, Kim? I think you're not the only one who would make such a statement.
Yes.
Sorry, I lost my mouse for a minute. There's different processes, whether it's the way the office runs, the way enrollment is done. One does CASAS, one does not. You know, more online here, less online there. They can make things difficult, and it can make it scary, the idea of change, because how does that change affect our students, right? We want any change that we make in the background, we want to either one, benefit or seem as seamless as possible for our students, because many of them, especially at the adult schools, in early ESL courses, particularly, there's a stranger danger element there. They're in their cohort of people who they're just getting to know. They're learning to speak the language. And when you throw a wrench in there and change happens, it can be very frightening. It can be very scary. So that's what I meant by how differing processes can make programs difficult, and partnering can be quite difficult when you have to make changes within the way that you're actually operating behind the scenes rather than what you're doing that's student facing. Does that kind of make sense?
Caroline has raised her hand.
I just have a quick question, really for Kim, based on what you put in the chat. And I'm wondering if you can elaborate more on your comment about who gets apportionment or points if the student is dual enrolled. Can you elaborate more on that?
Yeah, I'm just curious, because we actually had this discussion. We don't have many students that take advantage of this. So that's my bad. So I need to deal with that. But so if you have a student who's they're at the adult school and they're working on their high school diploma, or they transfer, or I'm sorry, they're enrolled in other courses. So like they're taking classes at the adult school and at the college, working towards the same goal. How does that work as far as like the adult school would get their WIOA points and stuff for whatever the student's doing there, and then the college would get what they get for what the student's doing there?
Yeah.
Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yes, and so, I mean, when I'm thinking of dual enrollment and how all of this was written, it's really to put students in credit-bearing classes, not non-credit classes, right? Peter and Jeannie. And so, to me, then the college is getting that FTES for that credit student. And as the adult school, because they're dually enrolled, then you're getting whatever, if you're WIOA funded, payment points that would go for your WIOA funding.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense, because we do have students who are enrolled in the adult school and enrolled in non-credit courses at the college and enrolled in maybe a beginning credit class of some kind. So dividing those up are, yeah, okay. Thank you. That makes a lot more sense.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. I appreciate that.
So without getting too much into the sort of nitty gritty details, it's worth considering that it's cut off at 11 units at the colleges, right? So for SB 554, it's not a full-time, it's 11 units, which makes sense if SB 554 aims at accelerating the completion of high school diploma or equivalency certificates. And it counts at both sides, on both sides. So credit, FTEs at the colleges, and toward high school diploma completion or WIOA points. When everything aligns well, the student is able to enroll in a credit-bearing course that counts toward prereqs that they might have at the colleges, or helps them attain a career technical and industry certificate, and also get units credits for their high school diploma completion. Right? So the student, when everything aligns perfectly, could really benefit tremendously from being dual or co-enrolled under SB 554. That is also something in our work with the colleges that it sort of surprised us all, how beneficial this can be for an adult learner who's eager to accelerate and get to a next stage in their journey. It was also a positive discovery for all of us that we finally might have a tool to support students more who do not qualify for Dreamer, who do not have residency status, who are not, there's no way for them to participate in community college courses, right, to matriculate, unless they're bleeding money. So we found a beautiful way to sort of have a bidirectional, an opportunity for a bidirectional partnership, where our partners at the colleges, especially at admissions and records, can recommend to students to start at an adult school with their journey, or continue their journey first at the adult school through dual enrollment under SB 554, participate in college courses while collecting enough time toward their residency status. So, the bringing this all together, we discovered, and Peter already alluded to it, means one has to have quite a bit of knowledge, right? Understanding of these complex processes, which are also sort of unique to each college. They are handled a little bit differently at each college. So where it's sometimes a strange negotiation process between what's happening on the ground and what the law, the letter or the spirit even of the law tell us to do. Right? And I think even the two colleges we are working with, even their processes are slightly different. where all of us are sort of grasping, hoping for some more guidance. And I see Neil's hand up. I wish just quick response to the question: are there visa restrictions that disqualify a student for dual enrollment? How can I say that? The usual, except for at the adult schools, the only condition there is somewhat a student has to be older than 18, right? But if you have a J1 visa or even an F1, that would not be an option. Neil?
Yeah, some of the other partnerships, and you might have referenced this, is we've seen some schools working with UCs and CSUs on the AB 540, SB 68, qualifying through the adult school, the number of hours. So if you're a non-resident, you don't really have to pay that non-resident tuition. So that gets waived. It's a little complicated. We haven't streamlined the process. It's kind of on an individual basis between you and your UC or you and your CSU right now. And so the other one I wanted to bring up, and I think John Warner put this in the chat, is the ability to benefit, although that you have to be a resident and you have to show that you're a citizen, but that's related to Pell Grants. And you can, if you're still, I think you're still working on your high school diploma, you can get Pell Grants to attend college, and they waive those fees as well. Because you're a resident, you get the resident tuition fees anyway. But that's another avenue. We have a few, not many. It's more of a, we've seen that with the CSUs using ability to benefit, and a lot of the for-profit colleges using that because they can get the federal grants. So that's another one that I think Chafee is trying to put into their pathway matrix. It's a little complicated. And it's only for certain types of students. So, out of this dual enrollment effort, there's all kinds of other things that you can partner with. So.
Thanks, Neil.
Sure.
Thank you for bringing this up. Yes, ability to benefit. I think Chafee might be the spearheading that one as well, because it could be a nice stepping stone, right? SB 554, and once you're ready and have gathered enough, you can then move into ability to benefit. Yeah. All right, thank you. More questions from our end. How do you ensure the implemented processes are running smoothly? I think Dana was the one, or it was actually Kim bringing up, this is a process, right? So this has to be nourished, cultivated all the time. How do you do that?
I can address that from Chafee's perspective, if you'd like. We talk about it constantly. It's always an agenda item in our consortium meetings. We also are very willing to devote resources to this program because we realize that it needs it. As you say, it's that one-on-one relationship working with the students that ensures success, and that the enrollment grows. And so our group at least realizes you've got to give it some resources. So in fact, this year we just gave some funds to our college for some more counseling hours and that sort of thing. So it's something that is important to the group, and it's working for our students. And so but you always have to keep on top of it. It's communication is the key here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they report back to the adult schools, and how many students from each school. We keep track of our own statistics as far as transitions and of course the dual enrollment and everything, but we get regular reports. And so we know how everybody is doing. And if someone needs some help, we'll give it to them, that sort of thing. So you have to keep on top of your data. You have to collect it. You have to put some money into it, you know. But it's, and communication, as I say, but it's a high priority. So it's always being discussed.
It's interesting to hear your example, Dana, of a program that's already so mature in a sense, because I think a theme that we heard among emerging programs was also how critical it was to kind of define that team, define its communication patterns, and the teams differed from site to site. You know, some came out of the college and career readiness work that was already happening, or some came out of an existing transitions team, or some kind of existing partnership that was there. But all of them needed to give attention to that. What is the structure that's going to allow us to communicate well and collaborate well?
Right.
Dana also brought up a point that's very important on our end. We keep track of data at the adult school site because right now there's still no solid way of keeping track of our do and vote student at the college's site. Right? So we bring that actually to our conversation with the college partners. Here's where our students are at. Here are the hard numbers, which I think is important for all of us, but also to explore new opportunities for us to expand programs regarding dual enrollment. What works well, what doesn't, which courses do students choose, which professors are they sort of leaning toward. That's important information for the colleges and deeply appreciated. It is very intense and time and human resources consuming. So to Dana's point, some financial support, some designated monies to support this position is important. Yep. It is additional work for admissions and records who are often already sort of maxed out.
Right.
There are 2 questions in the chat.
Could I just add that, you know, that as we mentioned before, one thing we heard from a lot of people was the critical importance of establishing a data sharing agreement between the college and the adult school in terms of, you know, as was just mentioned about tracking progress. So you don't have to constantly be chasing it down, figure out ways to automate that. And so legally establishing those agreements was really important.
Mm-hmm. And maybe going backwards, the question, no, it's actually the first one. Could you elaborate on the adult schools giving the students credit for college courses? Does it always happen? How have the other colleges done it? Who is part of those conversations? And the important, etc. There are so many questions. Yes. So part of the conversation, and maybe Dana and Kim can chime in. For us, part of the conversations had to be admissions and records, financial aid, counseling at the college's site. We also brought in two department chairs, math and English at each college, because that's where many of our students sort of tend to take courses. And then on the adult school side, we brought in transition support services and ABE, ASE, high school diploma program directors to help with that project. It turned out that admissions and records is a very strong partner to nurture and to stay in close communication with, probably not that surprising. But that was also a crucial part of the conversation on credit for college courses. That's a mapping project that we engaged in, and there are some general regulations, but to focus on our example, we looked at the college courses that we could map backwards as contributing to the completion of a high school diploma, right? So English 120, for example, the review of the curriculum and review of the requirements our school district has allowed us to say, here's the amount of units that you can get for that college course. The school districts handle that slightly differently, but generally speaking, it is a mapping of courses at the colleges to the high school requirements we have in adult education for the completion of high school diploma or equivalency. How's the student classified after she completes the high school diploma and is dual enrolled? So they will depends on where they're going, right? They are not dual enrolled SB 554 students anymore. They are either reclassified as full-time. They lose the special admin status. What else do we have in the chat? Dana, we have an assistant director of adult education at the college who's entirely CAPE funded. That is a nice practice. She works closely with counselor at the college and adult schools to keep track of students and what they have done.
We definitely heard many good examples of CAPE funding being used in this space to kind of knit the systems together and do that really intentionally. I think the staff position that Dana describes is one example, but we heard a lot of different examples of kind of thoughtfully using those funds.
Mm-hmm. And then, yes, constant communication is key. Yes. Great. Before we check in with Neil and Carolyn, we have one more question, hopefully one for all of us. What's getting in the way of expanding or starting the implementation of SB 554? What are your experiences? Why, for me, the question related to it is also, why is not everyone doing it? So what's getting in the way? Staffing changes.
Well, and behind Kim's point, correct me if I'm wrong, Kim, but sometimes I think we heard just the immense need for leadership to kind of launch something like this. It really takes some intentional effort and finding the right leaders.
No, I totally agree. And that's what I meant is that, you know, you have a point person or a very strong person who's, you know, really into this program, is willing to commit, and that person leaves, then you need to either replace that person or you have office staff and, you know, A&R staff members who are helping to facilitate the program. They leave. Now you got to train somebody new and make sure everybody else is aware that this program exists. New principals come in, you know, the principal of the adult school, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Happens all the time.
Yeah, which for same in our region, right? It's one of the pain points for us. There's not a system, so it becomes very person dependent. And the person, it might not just like go into another job. It might be as simple as the person is on vacation for 2 weeks, right? And the whole process for some of our students comes to a halt because paperwork cannot be processed, or another specialist at A&R doesn't know about the special processes for SB 554 or any type of dual enrollment from the adult schools. So our students risk not being able to register for the courses they were interested in. They lose the time frame for it, and thus sometimes the whole semester. So this whole process is still extremely vulnerable to personnel and too person dependent for us, for our experience. Yeah, it's not an institutional process, and I can see that as a challenge that will only get bigger when we now think about also the new Assembly Bill 102. What else might be getting in the way? Quiet audience. Dana, is there something that is on your mind for that?
I would think some of you came to this session to find some guidance and inspiration on how to address what we're bringing up here. That we heard a lot of that, where there was a lot of bumps in the road for people, either within their institution or just not understanding the law, I think, the legislation, how it worked.
Yeah, and Eric, were not being familiar with the process.
Mm-hmm.
How to start when you're new. I appreciate you mentioning that, Eric. I think you're not the only one who feels new. There certainly are such large numbers across the state who are in exactly that place. And I think it's one of our big questions. And I think part of the reason for sparking this kind of dialogue is to see what was it going to take for others to feel able to enter this space.
Yeah, and a little bit also what Ashland points out, right? It needs leadership buy-in, right? If it's a lot to ask a single faculty member or a single A&R person. The leadership needs to be committed to that type of dual enrollment process, even if it's not the biggest number of students initially who might go through SB 554. So far, from what we've heard in the field, it has always been a very sort of individualized, solitary implementation. Someone who's interested in it and drives the implementation of that process forward, or a team at a local college driving this process forward. But no, not really a system or a guidebook or guidance on which steps to take. Right? So we have best practices, and I think the summary that Jenny and Peter put together points to those. But there's really not something like a toolkit that we could readily utilize, especially when we're new to the processes.
And Uta, we heard again and again that ask for that guidance. And
Right.
We had to be very clear that what we were producing in this brief was really feeding back what we heard in terms of these themes of practices that seem to be working, as well as sort of challenge areas. But we definitely heard the need for something that was more of a kind of formal guidance document.
Right, how to do it.
How to do it and be flexible enough so that each consortium still has enough, right, flexibility to work with their colleges and with their schools. So there's this huge potential to make SB 554 this very tailored, a tool that can be tailored to each individual student and each individual college level scenario. However, before I can tailor it to individual needs, I need to have sort of a structure in place that it makes me feel comfortable enough to then tweak and tailor to the specific needs. Yeah, flexibility, communication, and compromise are key. When I initially did this, I first created a list of appropriate college courses, had it approved, then I approached the guide school. That's a very good option. We started from the adult school and went to the colleges and lobbied on behalf of the adult school. So for us, it was the other way around. The adult school was more interested in that opportunity for our students. And we actually shared with our students that the choice is theirs, right? But it's an informed choice. Students meet with the transition specialists who introduces them to what the college has to offer and which courses might work better than others. So there's quite a bit of this one-on-one educational journey mapping going on before a student decides which courses to take. I think one of what might sometimes get in the way for us is it's very person dependent. It's very vulnerable to that. And supporting our students who have to reapply for SB 554 every semester to ensure that they stay in the program. And that there's still no way to track data across two different systems, our adult schools and the colleges. That makes it harder to, sometimes it makes it harder to convey how important that program is for some of us. What else? Well, if for the moment that's it, let's move forward a little bit and see what our partners, our guests heard. Neil and Carolyn, what are your impressions? What are your takeaways so far?
So I'll jump in first. You know, listening to all of this really reminds me of back in my ROP days and articulation agreements with our community college, and how those articulation agreements were instructor to instructor, and how when I moved to the state, our goal, and we never got there when I was in that role, was to look at course to course statewide articulation agreements. And so listening at the beginning made me think so much about that, and that in those articulation agreements, if one of those instructors left, you had to start all over again.
Yeah.
And so I think it just goes back to how agencies within a consortia need to work together to perhaps do, as Kim said, I really like what Kim said about creating, as the college, creating that list first of what are those college appropriate classes, getting it approved, and then going to a consortium meeting with the right people and sharing that information with the adult schools. And then and then looking at that student journey, and then how do you help that student through the rest of the process. And so I made a couple of, I wrote a lot of notes, but of note, the fact that there was the need for more guidance that really needs to come from the chancellor's office, and the idea of sort of steps that could be universal steps to this process. And to me, you know, that first step is what is, you know, the first step is the openness, right, of the administration at the college to do this, to jump on this bandwagon. But then secondly, to have someone who can look at those courses and say, these are the ones that would be appropriate for students who are working on their high school diploma or equivalency to, you know, work on in the credit side. I think that, you know, to me, then taking that process, that step process, and then talk about what's next, and looking at that student journey map, and how does that student then make that journey, and where are the pain points for that student? Where is it that they might stumble? They have to get to the campus. How do they get to the campus? They have to pay for parking. Can they afford to pay for parking? Right? Are there books involved? Do they have to pay for books? And so there was those support services that were talked about at the beginning. And then back to the comment that John Werner made, and Neil talked about it a little bit, is that whole idea of the ability to benefit. And we are not doing a good job in California to take advantage of ability to benefit. And that is something that we really want to look at. And dual enrollment helps us to do that. Again, it's for those students that have documentation, but we have a lot of students that have work documentation or can participate in that ability to benefit program. So I know that through John Werner and COABE, we're looking at trying to get some steps and some processes, some presentations on how to do that piece throughout the state. So probably more coming in January on that. But that's sort of my takeaway in all of this. And I know I had an invitation to be here, but I had already started this session on my planner because I really wanted to come here and listen to all of this, because ability to benefit is something that, for lack of repetition, is a benefit for our students and their families, right? If you look at it in that bigger picture. So that's my takeaway from all of this. And so I really appreciate everyone's input and the report.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Carolyn. There are a few points came up in the chat and also for me. The making sure that the student has ways to address other fees is important. So when we initiated the process with our college partners, we also initiated the conversation on student health fees, materials fees, general student fees, which were, because of our conversation, waived, right? So our students in dual enrollment do not pay any fees. And we have an agreement that if they need materials, textbooks, etc., that we have a loaner program for them. That's a lot of commitment from the college's side. And it's also combined with the effort to find zero textbook courses for our students and make sure that they have priority registering into those zero textbook courses. Again, that's a conversation to be had, right?
Right. And let me just add on to that. Then another resource is for those students that are also co-enrolled in Title I. Then there are services and resources there that can help pay for those textbooks.
Absolutely. Yes, very good point. The SB 554 is, I know this is a tricky issue, but I think I want to push back a tiny little bit. The law says that it's the student's choice, right? They can choose whatever credit course they want, except for PE. Now, with that much choice, come a lot of difficulties, right? What is the right choice? So we spend quite a bit of time discussing, do we recommend, do we select a certain group of courses for the students? We decided in the end to make it the student's choice under the condition that the student takes an accelerated prep course at the adult school that also counts toward their high school diploma completion. So it's 4 weeks accelerated. It's under our English programs where we prepared students pretty solidly for them being able to make an informed choice. But that way allowed also for, I think we encourage students who are not college bound and who will not continue with college, but they have an awesome experience, right? They know what college is like, even when they then decide on some other career steps. So that sort of group we were able to address because we left it to the student in the end to make that choice. And it's one of the challenges for us, and I think all of us, is to balance out the conversation. This is not high school dual enrollment. It is under, it's under that big title, dual enrollment, but our adult education dual enrollment processes are different. And that's important for us to understand. It's important for admissions and records to understand. On the good side, admissions and records learns, oh, it's not as complicated and cumbersome as the high school dual enrollment, but it is something new. So if you already have, you or all of us, if we already have solid high school dual enrollment programs, that's good. But now comes the important piece to address our adult learners. So processes do look different for adult ed. We created a big map where we, in addition to articulation agreements, what counts as what in our high school diploma completion and is also a college course. So it doesn't always need to be an articulated course, but that helps because it gets the student more for what they're engaging. Someone mentioned ESL in the chat. That's an interesting next point for taking SB 554 forward. Currently, it says students have to be enrolled in a high school diploma, high school equivalency program at an adult school, which is not an ESL program. So it's on us, and that is our power, right, to figure out how does that work? How might the student be co-enrolled, dual enrolled at the adult school in an ESL program and a high school completion program, high school diploma completion program, or maybe there's a well-developed curriculum that is a high school diploma, high school equivalency course geared, tailored to use language learners. So there are different ways we can make this. We can expand SB 554. And Myra from the Chancellor's Office just joined us. Myra, I don't know how much you're part of our conversation, but thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Tay. Sorry I'm late. I was in another meeting, but I was able to catch the last part of it. I was looking through the presentation that was sent to me earlier, and I think overall it's a really good, if we're thinking about our students, I think it's a really good like initiative to put forward for our students, because it really opens up, you know, the opportunities for them to be able to get a taste of what is offered at the college, what that feels like before. I know there's always that fear of students transitioning into community college. And so being able to incorporate that dual enrollment piece and create that pathway for them to be able to get a taste of what it's going to feel like, you know, being able to eventually be on the college campus. So overall, I think it's really good. But sorry I'm late, so thank you for having me here.
No, I deeply appreciate it. Thank you for joining us. And yes, it's also, I think we all know that this is not a linear journey for any of us, right? Education never is. It's sort of a handy simplification for some of our projects, but especially for adult school learners, there's no way that anything leads from A to Z straight directly. So if we have this in mind and allow for life to happen, we don't really have a choice. Acknowledge that life is happening and that there might be detours, there might be stops, there might be exploration that turns out to be a one-way street, and then I just have the skills to turn around and select a different option, right? Then college and the college experience under dual enrollment might be a once in a lifetime really amazing experience, even if I don't continue with college. But I'm more knowledgeable, I have more insights, and I will ultimately be more successful in my career, even if that career doesn't include college. So I think for us, it's also an opportunity to think less in the linear way and way more in sort of a subway map system. Right? It goes all over, but with sufficient support, we get to where we need to go.
You know, another thought is that when you have dual enrollment, the students then see themselves as a college student. And we know that from the high school dual enrollment side of this, it takes that that fear of college away, because they're dually enrolled, so they still have their adult school support hand-holding a little bit, right, behind them, but yet they're on that campus, they're in those classes, they're getting those experiences that enrich their lives on a college campus, and they can see them. It helps to them, these students, our students, to see themselves as a college student, if that is the direction they want to go. So I think it breaks down some of their internal barriers that they might have built up for themselves that have caused them to be in adult education, right? Maybe they weren't successful in high school, or they dropped out and now they're back, but they still can't see themselves there. And so having that opportunity for dual enrollment helps them to think of themselves as a college student.
Mhm.
I just wanted to add one more thing is, so one thing that could really ramp this up or change the temperature or change these issues that you might be having, or if you're sitting on the fence, if transition is tied to performance. And so if that happens in the future, this is akin to when we were in AB 86, 8 years ago, we were doing the grassroots planning, and all of a sudden AB 104 came along with the 500 million, and all of a sudden everything changed because it was a big amount of money. So right now we're kind of in that grassroots efforts. It's optional, dual enrollment is nice. Some people are doing it, some people aren't. But the minute it is tied to performance, then you're going to see everything change. And I think could be happening. And so we have some schools that are prepared for it and some schools that aren't. And so we'll see what happens.
That would certainly be a game changer. There's nothing like that type of motivation. Yeah. It's I think one of the most exciting experiences we had in our region that it created a new level of understanding for faculty and instructors at the adult schools. For some, it was, and that will not surprise you in this session, our college partners didn't know that the adult schools are around them. So SB 554 conversations were eye-opening to them. And it opened up a whole new world to our students, right? So which benefits us because we have more students, but more importantly, it gives back agency and ownership to the students, which we in the past sometimes haven't been so successful doing. So that this dual enrollment under SB 554, and hopefully somehow together with AB 102, might break open a lot more than we can see right. So transition points to be measured are transitions to employment, transitions to college, transitions to a next post-secondary course, for example. Those are true hard transition points that we should all be ready to measure, and providing more choice to our adult learners will support that process.
I just wanted to make a comment. I think something that comes to mind at the college that I used to work for, we used to have, working with some of the non-credit students. What I found interesting in coming in and just learning more about this particular bill is that from non-credit to credit, if you are not, meet AB 540 or have the citizenship requirement, you're stuck there. You cannot transition, unless you meet the hour criteria and so forth. And so to see that there is this pathway for the adult schools to be able to take, these credit courses and they're for free, I think that's a really big win for our students. So I think it's a really good opportunity to continue to promote this, to be able to have more students be able to benefit from this.
Yes, absolutely. We touched on it a little bit before. I think this is so important, and where probably also is the ask for some more guidance, because I think college partners often don't know about this resource. If there were a bit more guidance from the Chancellor's Office for A&R and others involved, right, during the enrollment process, consider that an option, so that someone doesn't start college but rather starts at the adult school, and that it's still benefiting the colleges. We are not taking away students, but rather by recommending adult school first, we can ensure much more that the student is successful in their career, in their college journey later. Yes, fixes and CCC apply would be very. Yes, that's thank you for that comment in the chat. Absolutely.
So just a quick question. I see this comment about fixes to CCC apply for dual enrollment, and I thought that all of those were done. Are there still some issues?
Carolyn, in a presentation earlier today, I think in the Foothill College presentation, they talked about an issue where if you click on, you have a high school diploma and you're enrolled in adult school, it kicks you out. So I don't know if anybody else was having that problem, but that seems to be something that they expressed today that was an issue. So that makes it difficult for the student to, so that's why a good practice they had is have the person go with the student when they enroll and sit there as they go through the enrollment process.
So I'm sure there's a mechanism for alerting. I know this is not in Myra's purview whatsoever, but alerting CCC apply, right? That there are bugs, you know, for lack of a better word. Is there a process, Myra, for that? And when those things come up, that there's like a tech help?
At the college site there are.
Okay.
Yeah. And sometimes also students might not necessarily identify us as coming from an adult school when they complete that application. So it's also, there might be an easier way for us to measure that and not have to train a student for that specific aspect. There was one point brought up here, it's how can performance be measured? What I'm wondering how performance can be measured. That's probably beyond the scope of this session, but it's an absolutely crucial point, right? If transition since transition matter, and we already know that they are not happening without quite a tremendous support system behind it, we need to find a way to measure that support system behind it. And that is not the CASA's block that says transition services. It is not. We need to find a way to make the hours and hours we spend with students, rightfully so, supporting them in their network, with community resources, with learning how to make an informed decision. We have no way to measure that right now in a meaningful way. I can measure the hours spent with students, but that doesn't tell me about the impact and that this meeting has. So it's not counting hours, though that might be a start. But we in CAPE, we need to find a way to account for the tremendous work that's done by our student support services. Great, there's a link in the chat to the evaluation. We're coming to the end of the session. I just was told. If there, I'm gonna let the slide dangle there for a moment. Now what? I would love if we can continue this conversation. I think the call for guidance is loud and clear. I think it will become louder with AB 102. That will be interesting to figure out how these things work together. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for your insights, and thank you to our special guests, Myra, Neil, Carolyn.
Thank you, everyone. I did post the corrected link to the evaluation in the chat. My apologies for sending the incorrect one the first time. If everybody could take a second to fill it out before enjoying the rest of the afternoon. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.